All right, welcome to launch day again here at Invite Press. Today we are so excited to announce the launch of Jesus Unbranded. This is 2 books in one. We are so excited. So here is the first volume, Jesus Unbranded, Volume 1, Stories with Spin. And then we have Jesus Unbranded, Volume 2, Stories with Bite. And we are here today with 2 of the 3 contributors to the book, Mike Elms, main author of the book, and Jason Moore, artist that created the art in the book, and our other colleague who is traveling in Sydney today, Ivan Philby, who could not be with us. But we are so excited to talk with Mike and Jason. So Mike, let's kick it off with you. Tell us, what is Jesus Unbranded?
Jesus Unbranded is all the parables that Jesus told, pulled together in one place across 2 volumes. Placed in chronological order, which was really interesting, but rewired, if you like, told in the manner as if Jesus were telling them to you and me and Jason and anybody viewing this stream here and now. Because if he was telling his parables here and now, he'd probably use storylines that talked into our 21st century culture rather than those tapped in to first century Palestine. It's sort of bit of a no-brainer if you think about it, but strangely, few people have thought about it.
That is great. So you actually were given a little nudge by the Holy Spirit to do this. Is that right? So first, I guess we should talk a bit about your background. You've been in the ad business for a long time.
Yeah.
And so you're part of your lifelong career has been storytelling. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. I've been blessed to work in a fascinating and interesting business, a business that likes to get to the truth, by the way, because you can sell a bad product once, but you can't sell it twice. If you sell it on the back of a lie, you never sell anything else again. So it's actually quite a transparent business. But I've been blessed to work at 2 big agencies and work with some of the world's leading companies along the way. So that's my background, and there's stories which weave their way into and out of and around products. And the whole idea of advertising is you make things interesting, you make them relevant, you catch people's attention, you talk to them, you create a curiosity in them, a desire to hear, to find out more. You can't sell products off the screen. Advertising is a really weak force when it comes to sales, but you can create the context in which people get interested. So a few years ago, I was encouraged to lift those talents and apply them to the gospel.
Encouraged is a nice way of describing what you've told me is getting harassed by the Holy Spirit while in church.
It was like this big divine finger prodding me in the shoulder. No, I was moved one week to preach on the Good Samaritan, moved by the pastor, in fact. He said, "Mike, can you do this one? Because I can't think of any fresh angles on there. So why don't you have a go?" So I looked and I thought, we just know this story inside out, backwards, upside down. And then just the thought struck me, but what if we were to hear it today? How would Jesus tell it to us? And so we recast it. I mean, the Good Samaritan, most people wouldn't know a Samaritan if they tripped over one. I mean, and we lose the nuances as to why a Good Samaritan was just an oxymoron. You know, it's
yes,
the Jews, the only Good Samaritan was a dead one. So. And so over here, it gave birth, when I preached on it here, it gave birth to the compassionate Millwall fan. Millwall being a sports team with an unruly brand of supporters. Villagers are quite scared when Millwall come to play on their doorstep and bring their enduring fans with them.
So that might be in the States like an Eagles fan or something, you know, might throw up.
That speaks a Cowboys fan, yeah. That's you've just alienated half the Super Bowl audience for us there, Len. Personally, I love
anybody that knows me knows I'm a Cowboy fan, so I just had to get that in today. That's okay. Just keep going.
Yeah, but obviously the Millwall fan won't work in the States. So there are a few people there who will get it, but not that many. So we've just recast it for Jesus Unbranded, and he's become the caring Russian ultra. And if you know anything about Russian ultras, they are pretty much the vicious of the most vicious. So the idea of a caring, so just if you put him into the role of the Good Samaritan, suddenly the story rewrites itself. Yes. And brings it very close to home to people, because it's quite shocking.
Let me step back just a bit and kind of give some context for our viewers today. We got connected through our mutual friend, co-author Ivan Philby, through another friend, Shane Bishop, to produce this. And I got so excited when I saw your original work, which you had done for your UK audience. We decided to recreate this in a way that might make more sense, as you're describing, for an American audience. One of the questions that then came into play as we began to look at this project was, how do we create art that makes sense in the States? And right at the time we were discussing this, AI was blowing up. The ability to create images through AI was something new. So I immediately thought of our friend Jason Moore, who released a book last fall called AI in the Church. And so we contacted Jason and said, hey, what would it look like to create art for these parables? And so that started this conversation that turned into a three-way project. And it's hard to show on the screen. Oh, thank you. Look at that.
There he is.
Well done, Jason. There's one of them. The book is laid out like magazine style, and all the art in here is really kind of based on these pieces. So each one of the parables has kind of a core image then, Jason, that you produce. So do you want to talk about that process?
Sure. And I'll just back up to say that my memory was that you and I had a phone call one night, and I was telling you about the amazing things that you can now do with image generation. And you kind of said, hey, I've got this really interesting project that maybe we could use AI for, because is it 37 parables? Is that
the 39, but we've collapsed two into it to twin them up. Yeah.
And so the idea of trying to capture 39 or 37 different stories is really tough. I mean, if you're going to try and do stock photos, it's really hard to get specific stock photos that would communicate what you're after. And of course, you could create original art in a traditional way, but that's a pretty huge project as well. So AI was sort of the perfect opportunity for us to tell these stories. And of course, Mike led the way, and he helped me understand some terms that I was not familiar with. I didn't know what a Russian ultra was prior to depicting one on screen. And the punters, that was another one. I'm like, what's that now? And we had a whole conversation about yachts. And I'm like, well, yacht means something different here, I think, than what it means there. So it was a fun education hanging with you over the course of this project and bringing your vision to life through these images.
The first one you did.
No, yacht, sailboat.
Oh, right. Yeah. I was wanting to point out the first image that, Jason, you probably could pull this up directly, but the first image we used as a test when we were thinking through this was this image of an old Mustang. For the parable with two tales of when new into old won't go, which is the parable of the wineskins, if I remember correctly. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Yep.
You did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see. Can I bring that up? Oh, that's a different one. Well, you keep talking. I'll see if I can find it.
Let me just say that I was really keen with this book to make it as realistic as possible, so that when you look through it, you were confronted with images and scenes, scenarios from the 21st century. So ideally, I would have gone out and shot photos. I wanted photographic. I wanted it to be real in there. But as Jason says, it's just logistically and financially, it's sort of beyond the means. So for the UK edition, we did a reasonable job with sort of computer painting, but then AI, I mean, the images, when I saw them, it just blew my mind. It brought the whole thing alive. I mean, it was Len's idea, credit to him, but
it's
Jason
really
brought it.
to see it come to life. Here at our mother organization for Invite is the church, St. Andrew Methodist Church here in Plano, Texas. And St. Andrew's going to do a sermon series on these parables here starting in a few weeks. And I want to mention, too, this is a good time to mention, Mike, that you have produced kind of a study course, I think is what we call it, for 9 of the parables in the sequence. So 6 of these will be featured here locally at our church. But right now for the next week, if you sign up through the site there, so if you go to inviteministries.org, you can receive a free copy of that study guide, free of charge to pastors and leaders. If you go to the Jesus Unbranded there on inviteministries.org to get that. So that would be a perfect way, I think, to be able to apply this book and these parables to your church if you're in a position of church leadership someplace.
Yeah, I'm so keen that we do this, because we did this with a number of churches in the UK who used the book to run a series of sermons on parables. Those then fed into home groups, which is I wrote for them. They were home group, small group studies. And it just brought the whole thing back alive again. And then some churches went further and bought bulk copies of the book so that church members could pass them on, generally to families and friends. And also they could be distributed at outreach events like Alpha courses or seeker services. So there's a whole package of things. And these are such a good way to connect people with the gospel, mainly because it's the way Jesus connected most people with the gospel.
That's right.
But they're stories, and they're good stories. And they're eternal stories, and yeah, stories are the easy way to draw people in. And so we've known people who have been drawn in by these stories and become curious and wanted to find out more, and have found out more. So yeah, I'm really keen. If we, I'd encourage any church to take a real close look at this, because I think we'll be putting together a powerful package of materials. And you know what? These stories are dying. That's the horrible truth of the matter, because people are not reading their Bibles. They're not going to church as much as they used to. So they're not hearing the stories. And if the story's not being heard, they're going to die.
So we will, in addition to the current exclusive freebie we're offering, we're also planning on creating a more of a complete kit, to your point, Mike, which will be coming out in the coming months. So the books themselves are really the first piece of several things that are going to be happening here. And Jason, you had that Mustang art up there a second ago. Could you pull that up again?
Yeah.
I wish we had time to highlight all the art. There's been so many great pieces. Rilke, is it possible to go full screen on just Jason to show that? I don't put you too much on the spot there.
Let me scale it here. Hold on. Well, and I'll just add to the conversation for a moment that we were talking about the idea of going out and taking pictures and all that. And I think some people do have this misunderstanding about AI that it's you type something in and you get it in an instant. Some of these images took me, 15 or 20 hours to create one of them. And then others actually came together pretty quickly and were not as difficult. But, there are some of them that, like, I'll show one more here. This one's probably, hold on, I got to scale it because of the size of the images. This one to me is one of my favorite images in the whole book. And it's mainly because that would have been an impossible shot for us to get, to go up in an airplane and hire a crew. And, you can't find a stock photo like that. And Mike, maybe you can say something about the story behind this one. But I think the beauty of being able to use AI was that we could get something that was pretty photorealistic and that told a story that was interesting and different and you'd never find in a stock photo.
Yeah. Yeah, that one, by the way, is the parable of counting the cost. Right? And the no good do gooders were a bunch of people who decided to go out and do a big free fall jump for charity, and then one of the guys bottled it at the last minute. That blew the whole thing. He hadn't thought it through. Which is, if you go and read the parable of the counting of the cost, that's basically what Jesus was saying. But
let me point out, Mike, as I'm listening to you and we're watching this art, Jason, that you have produced. Part of the benefit and the beauty of these books is that each one of the parables is presented over the course of multiple pages. So we have the lead art, we have the new version, Mike, of your parable, and then it's followed by the original version of the parable, and then there's an opportunity to reflect on that. You've written some reflections, and then a space you can actually write in the book. Here's some notes about it. So it's designed to be a book that's as beautiful as a coffee table book, if you will, but also something that's very useful in the sense that you can actually write in it and use it for your own study and edification as well. And Jason, that Oscar one you just showed, that might be my favorite one. I mean, Mike, I've got a lot of favorites here, but that Oscar one, I remember when I read that one, that was, boy, I thought, oh, man.
The story's good, isn't it? Yeah, it's a good, tight story. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
really
certainly,
that's places of honor at the wedding feast, by the way. So,
yeah. And I was going to say, that's certainly an image we could never have gotten. We couldn't have, arranged for that.
no.
And what was kind of fun about the process of putting these together was like, this is still, I mean, AI is maturing
daily,
maturing very quickly. This was early on, and so there were new tools coming on the scene all the time, and so I discovered a tool that would let me get fine details, like all those hairs on his head there and all that. I was pushing as much as I could the boundaries of what AI could do, and feel pretty. These images, I haven't looked at them in a while. They stand up. I think they tell the stories well, and it was. Mike and I had many sessions of brainstorming back and forth, and me drawing sketches and holding them up to the screen and saying, "Mike, this is kind of what I'm thinking," and it was such a fun collaborative process.
Yeah, and I sort of rewrote, or certainly readjusted a few parables in the light of the image because it made me see things differently. So that's, I mean, you do, Jason. You use AI like an artist uses his sketchbook. You use AI to generate a rough image, and then you spend hours in the studio working on it. So, AI, I think, don't let it belittle your own artistic interpretation and input.
Well, thank you. That's my intent. Mike, I would love for you to just this one was one of my favorites too, because of the story connected to it. And you told me when you saw this image, you had an emotional reaction to it. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, well, that's the plaza. Yeah.
Well, tell them about your connection to there.
Well, I stayed at the plaza. I'm trying to think of what was my other connection, Jason.
Well, that was it. But you just told me that when you saw it, it kind of took you back to that moment. I think you even told me that you felt a little choked up when you saw it the first time because that was a time in your life you were staying there regularly and all of those things. And that's AI generated. That's not a stock photo. I mean, I had to do a lot of work to work without violating any copyright or anything. I had to kind of rebuild that, but then also create that scene. And it was also the vehicles in it and all of that were not present day, but a little bit older. So there was some stuff I did to try and make it kind of capture the story that you were after. And for me, that was like an aha moment that even if this is artificially generated, you can have very real emotion attached to the experience of reading the story, seeing the image, and bringing those two things together, especially for you, since this was a place that you actually visited.
I'll tell you what, Jason, there are a whole bunch of them that got me welling up over them because suddenly I could see the story there on the page in front of me. And as you know, an image is worth umpteen thousand words, right? But so it was just a dream. That part of my dream came true, and that's God blessing. God blessing you. It's such an extraordinary way that I never thought we'd have got there, and then miraculously we did. So yeah.
I remember before the book came out, and I first had this idea based on the things that Jason had sent me, and knowing Jason's work, but knowing that most people didn't know Jason's work in this context, I would tell people, like, we're going to do the images with AI. They would look at me like, what are you talking about? That's going to be a disaster. Wasn't until actually we got some images there, starting to roll out that people said, oh, I see what you mean. That's really cool. So
at this point, I have to issue an important disclaimer. Right? There was no AI involved in the writing.
Yes.
Not on it. I don't do chat. What's it called? Chat GPT. Okay.
Yep.
I just don't use AI. I think it would make things too easy. You become lazy. I think.
Well, for sure. And you mentioned your background a little bit, Mike, but just for the sake of the audience, I mean, when you worked at Ogilvy and worked at Tempest Group in UK, I mean, you were doing ad campaigns for Guinness and Ford and Nestle and things like that. So, I mean, this is your history. It's your background and your expertise is to write these compelling stories, and that shines through. Jason, while you're pulling up a couple of images, I wanted to emphasize that the book is available on Amazon right now. So what we like to do on these launch days is to emphasize, if you're going to buy an individual copy for yourself, it's best to buy that on Amazon, because that helps the ranking. The algorithms, it helps to draw attention to the book through Amazon, which of course is where the vast majority of books are sold today. But I also want to mention that on inviteministries.org, we have our site set up for bulk discounts. So if you want to use this in your small group setting to really explore the parables, don't buy 10 or 20 copies on Amazon, because that will hurt you. We have discounts built in to provide you some savings if you were to go to inviteministries.org. So that's our recommendation there in terms of how many you want and what you're using it for. Then one of those two locations. Of course, it's also available on Barnes & Noble and wherever books are sold today as well. So that's what we like to do here on launch day. Jason, what other kind of art do you have there?
This was another one of my favorite images from the book. And, again, to me, it feels very photorealistic, but to be able to take that coin, and this one had a title where it's like, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to make this work? And I think I sketched this out, and Mike and I went back and forth and felt like it worked. But Mike, do you want to say anything about this particular one and give them a sense of what that image represents?
Yeah, well, it's the hidden pearl, right? Power of the hidden pearl, and there's, and I think, don't know, this one is going to get me welling up, because this is the parable of the lost coin, right? But I set this in a reality, and the reality was a time when my wife Valerie lost her wedding ring. And it wasn't just any wedding ring; it had been a grandmother's wedding ring. And I just remember the way we searched and searched and searched for it. Sadly, it didn't have the happy ending that the parable has. We never found that wedding ring. And the galling thing is, gold is indestructible. Gold goes on and on. So somewhere it is laying there, waiting to be found. But I can tell you, if we would have somehow find it now, if somebody found it and said, "Oh, I heard you might have mislaid one of these," we would be ecstatic, right? But that's just a fraction of the joy there is in heaven when a lost soul turns.
See, this is bringing back memories. You would tell me each of the stories, and I would be so inspired by just listening to you tell me, and then I'd get to go and create an image that would try and capture how well you were telling these stories that felt so relevant. And we need to do another book, Mike, so I can listen to you tell stories again.
It's funny you should say that, Jason. Len doesn't know it yet, but I just finished my first working manuscript of Proverbs.
Oh, I know you've been working on it, Mark. I'm excited to see it. We actually want to talk about the fact that there's two here as well. That by the time you do this 37 times, it gets a little bit much for a single volume. So we actually cut this up a little bit according to the narrative sequence. You mentioned they're done in chronological order. Volume 2 is when Jesus turns his face towards Jerusalem. So they start to get a little more edge to them at this point, don't they, Mike?
Yeah, the first part of his ministry, the first couple of years, he was traveling in and around Galilee, and he was teaching people. They were teaching parables. He was teaching about the kingdom of heaven and principles. It all followed on from the Sermon on the Mount as he unpacked that. Two punters. Sorry, that's yeah. Anyway, don't let me get distracted. So, but there comes a point, and it comes after that phrase. He set his face towards Jerusalem, and the whole tonality of his storytelling changes. These are stories with bite, right? And they're told with a purpose. They're told. He's got some attack stories in there, some defense stories, and as I say, the tonality is completely different. You haven't asked yet why we called this Jesus Unbranded.
Well, answer that question. That's a good question.
It's a good question to have asked. The reason we did is that, as I mentioned, we set this in chronological order. Now, there are various takes upon what that chronological order is. He pays you money, you take your choice. We went for one which started with the new wine in new wineskins, right at the start of Jesus' ministry. I've come to do new things a new way. Coincided with his first miracle, turning water into wine at Cana. It ended with the sheep and the goats as his last parable, which is all about Judgment Day. So that worked for me. And then we threaded them in chronological order. The advantage of that is you get more context for the parables, but you also see through the parables what Jesus was doing at each stage of his ministry. And you get more drawn into the depth of it, and you get to travel with him. And I realized that as I came to the end of this exercise, I had walked with Jesus through the whole of his ministry. And I'd heard him speaking to me as he spoke then, which is important because in the centuries since then, all sorts of people have grabbed a hold of the Christian faith of Jesus, have added to it, changed bits, grabbed it for their own agenda. That'd be good or bad, but it's changed. And I found the same thing happened with brands along the way. Successive marketing regimes and ad agencies would grab it and they'd add bits to it and they'd move it on and they'd change other bits until suddenly it was a bit of a mess, really. And on more than one occasion we got called in. Such brand, Guinness was one of those, and you had to go right back to the start of the brand and say what made it what it was in the first place. You'd strip all that away, you go right back and say, what were the origins of this? And we called that process unbranding. Stripping away the layers, like taking the varnish off a table so you could get to see the real wood beneath it, stripping it back to the unbranded Jesus, the authentic Jesus.
That's
the real
so
Jesus.
That's so good, Mike. Hey,
that's something that comes through the book. It has for me anyway, and other people have said similar things about it. So.
This is probably a good opportunity to talk about Ivan a little bit while he's not here. Talk about
he's not here. We can say what we like.
so tell us about his contribution to this process, Mike, and what was so important for you.
Well, Ivan, I met him for various reasons at the House of Lords. Because we were in the bar at the House of Lords. We were at an event there, and I think he was attached to me because he thought I might have some money that I could pass over. Well, I said, I don't have any of that, but I got some other resources. But anyway, we got chatting, and I gave him, when he found out I'd written the book, I gave him a copy of it. And he came back to me, he actually loved it. And then he said, you know what, Mike, you should do this he's an American Brit, by the way. He spent as much time in the States as he has he was born in Kings Lynn in Norfolk, but he's mid-Atlantic now, right? And he said, you should do this for our friends in the States. I said, I'd love to, but I know about the States. I've been there dozens of times from business, holidays, running marathons and what have you, but I've never lived there. I've never been inculcated in it, and I still can't speak the language fluently. So I said, how about you and I, Ivan, get together and do that? And he said, okay, fine. Well, let's find out if it's worth it, first of all. I'll pass a copy of the UK book over to Shay, and maybe you'll pass it to his publisher. And if we get a bite, then it's worth putting the effort in. And lo, we got the bite. And that, Ivan brought an understanding of the culture. And that's so important, because, if Jesus were telling the parables in Britain, he would talk them into the Brit culture. If he's telling them in the States, he'd talk into the US culture. In Australia, he'd talk into the Australian culture, if they had one. But I got lots of cousins in Australia. So he brought that cultural understanding. He also brought theology. Now, I'm a lay preacher. I think I'm a reasonable lay preacher, but Ivan's got qualifications. He's got proper theology around him, and that was Mike, really important.
Mike, I can forge you some with AI. I can make it look really real.
He's a good guy to know, right?
I don't need it. No, I mean, I passed the UK book through, several theologians because I wanted it checked. But Ivan brought that US mindset with his own theological qualifications and directly into the authorship process. So that was invaluable. And he just brought a lot of fun. We had a lot of laughs. We got very close. We're now good mates, and he made it all so enjoyable. God bless Ivan. We wouldn't be here now if it weren't for Ivan. So that's someone else got sent my way.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate you saying that. I also want to highlight, we had an endorsement we wanted to show. I think, Gabrielle, if you still have that. Mike, Ivan, and Jason know Jesus is not boring. I love that. They introduce his parables as modern-day stories with arresting images that kept me reading. I couldn't put the stories down, by Dr.
Nice.
Hank Voss at Taylor University. So thank you, Dr. Voss, for that endorsement. We are so excited about this book, Mike. I've been so blessed by our relationship. It's finally hit the street. Today is the day. It's been a long time coming.
Yay.
And it's fun to see it out there. And I trust that the Lord is going to do great things with it.
Yeah. I should say, we need to keep these stories alive. I think that's something the whole church, with a capital C, should be able to get behind. Let's keep these stories alive. That means they've got to be read. They've got to be read to other people. Other people have got to read them. We've got to push back into the culture. There are too many people that think the tortoise and the hare is a parable that Jesus told.
I don't know why I'm laughing. It's terrible, but it's true.
Well, and Mike, I just want to say what a pleasure it was working with you, and thank you for entrusting me with helping you bring your spin on these parables to life. It was a real joy to get to collaborate with you and to really push the envelope as much as we were able to do.
Yeah, a lot of people think creativity comes out of hard work and grinding away. I think it comes out of fun. When you're having fun and doing something which fires your imagination, and we've all had a lot of fun doing this project.
Yes.
Joy, I think, would be perhaps a better word. That's a fruit of the Spirit, isn't it? And I think there's a lot of joy gone into the book. There's surprisingly, there's quite a few smiles as you go through it, and a few tears in the stories as well. So
It's a great.
I think I may have lost about the equivalent of a week of sleep on some of these things. But if you know me at all, you know that's not atypical. But fun is right.
Jason, I want to acknowledge to the world that how much I value your prodigious talents and what you have done for this book and making it better. It would not be where it is without your involvement. And I know you actually to say too that you did it during a time in which you were doing about 20 other things. So sleep was the thing that got lost in that mix. But the result is beautiful, and hopefully you have recovered.
Well, I have, and I'm tired from other things now. But I will also just add one other, fun but unexpected thing at the end was that, Mike, you had a vision for for a cover, and then we decided to make it 2 covers. That sort of came out of the day that we all met together in Dallas. I was just showing you all what images I was creating images on the fly, and you described a scene of Jesus amongst a crowd of people gathered in the city somewhere. And I just kind of punched something up real quick. And that was just for us to kind of wrap our heads around what could be done. And then at the end, we kind of came back to, could we make those things the cover? And of course they're new images. I also feel like, and we were probably wrapping things up, so maybe I need to just be quiet now. But I remember having such a great brainstorming conversation on the whiteboard, because I think when we all flew to Dallas, there was a different title for the book. And by the time we were done with that meeting, we had drawn some things on the whiteboard and crossed out Unbranded and Rebranded, or Rebranded was crossed out with Unbranded or whatever. But just
I said I'm not here to rebrand Jesus. That is definitely not the case. If anything, I said I'm here to unbranded, and they went, got it.
Yeah.
Somebody went out and crossed out "re" on the whiteboard and wrote "UN" on it. Unbranded.
Yeah.
So you can actually see the ghost of the "re" on the cover, I think. But,
yes.
I'm not here to.
I just wanted to acknowledge. I just wanted to acknowledge the serendipity of that moment and everything that came after that with going with 2 volumes and just the creative process and is it Diana it did the layout work in the book as well, which looks really nice. And so it was a great collaboration of a bunch of great people.
Here's a little thing to end on, right? So there's the first volume. So Jesus out. He's in Central Park, right? Because he's doing his tour around Galilee and so forth. He's out teaching people, and then things change. And here he is for the parables thereafter. Where is he? He's in a political environment. He's at Washington at the memorial, and he's got a crowd of people there, some of whom are having the temerity to look the other way. Jason and I had a bit of a fight about that. I said, I'm not going to cover my book, people ignoring Jesus. He said, but that's what people have done, Mike. I said, fair point, yeah. So it's just little details like that I think you can see how we've all been inspired by it.
That's great stuff. Thank both of you. Mike, your comment there a minute ago about joy, I just want to end on that this whole project is a joy. And my hope, if you're watching this today and you're still with us and you're thinking about using this in your church setting, that joy would be the inconsequence of introducing Jesus Unbranded parables in your local congregation as well. So now available, Jesus Unbranded, Volume 1 and Volume 2, stories without spin, stories with bite. Go to Amazon.com or inviteministries.org to get your copies today.